ಕರ್ನಾಟಕ ರಾಜ್ಯದ ಎಲ್ಲ KAS ಮತ್ತು IAS ಪರೀಕ್ಷಾರ್ಥಿಗಳಿಗೆ ಮತ್ತು ಈ ರಾಜ್ಯದ ಮುಂದಿನ ಭವಿಷ್ಯದ ಭಾವಿ ಅಧಿಕಾರಿಗಳಿಗೆ ಎಲ್ರಿಗೂ ಜ್ಞಾನಗಂಗೋತ್ರಿಯ ಹೊಸ ಸಂಚಿಕೆಗೆ ಸ್ವಾಗತ. ಟು ಆಲ್ ದ ಯಂಗ್ ಬ್ರೈಟ್ ಮೈಂಡ್ಸ್ ಆಫ್ ದಿಸ್ ನೇಷನ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ದ ಫ್ಯೂಚರ್ ಆಫ್ ದಿಸ್ nation, welcome to another edition of Gnanagangotris. In this edition, we are going to discuss about the mains related directive words. ಈ ಒಂದು ಸಂಚಿಕೆ ಏನು KAS ಮತ್ತು IAS ಪರೀಕ್ಷೆ ಅಥವಾ UPSC ಪರೀಕ್ಷೆ ಮುಖ್ಯ ಪರೀಕ್ಷೆ ಅಂತ ಏನಿರುತ್ತೆ ಆ ಮುಖ್ಯ ಪರೀಕ್ಷೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಬಳಸುವಂಥ ಕೆಲವೊಂದು ಸೂಚಕ ಪದಗಳು ಅಥವಾ ಡೈರೆಕ್ಟಿವ್ಸ್ ಅಂತಿದೆಯಲ್ಲ ಅದ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ರೈಟ್, ಮೊದಲೇ ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀವಿ ಈ ಎಂಟೈರ್ ಎಪಿಸೋಡು ಕಂಪ್ಲೀಟ್ಲಿ ಇಂಗ್ಲೀಷಲ್ಲಿ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ಆದರೆ ಕನ್ನಡ ಮಾಧ್ಯಮದ ವಿದ್ಯಾರ್ಥಿಗಳು ಇದೇನು ಆತಂಕ ಪಡುವಂಥ ಅವಶ್ಯಕತೆ ಏನಿಲ್ಲ. ಬಿಕಾಸ್ ಸೇಮ್ ಕಂಟೆಂಟ್ನ ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ವಿಡಿಯೋದಲ್ಲಿ ಕಂಪ್ಲೀಟಾಗಿ ನಿಮಗೆ ಕನ್ನಡ ಅನುಕರಣ ಇದನ್ನು ಮಾಡಿ ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ವಿಡಿಯೋ ನಿಮಗೆ ಅತಿ ಬೇಗ ನಾವು ತೊಗೊಂಬರ್ತಿದ್ವಿ. ಸೊ ಡೋಂಟ್ ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ಟು ವರಿ. ಓಕೆ, ಸೊ ಫಾರ್ ಆಲ್ ದ ಇಂಗ್ಲೀಷ್ ಮೀಡಿಯಂ ಸ್ಟೂಡೆಂಟ್ಸ್, in this video we are going to discuss about various directive words which are used in UPSC as well as KAS or KPSC gazetted probationary mains examination. Because most important for at least for the KPSC students that 98% of the selection comes from the whatever the score they're going to get it in the mains answer writing. So it is very much imperative for us to understand things in a technical basis. My name is Prakash Nayak and let us start this episode. Okay, right. So we'll start with the simple directives which are like most frequently asked, and it is common. You need to understand that these sort of directives are most common in KPSC as well as UPSC gazetted probationers mains examination. So for this episode is actually completely dedicated to explain to as to what is the meaning of this directive, where can we apply it, and some examples related to these directive words. Starting with the first one, discuss. So what is a discuss sort of a question? And for example, you can see there is one question which is taken from both UPSC and KPSC previous year's examination papers. Discuss the role of women in India's freedom movement during the Gandhian era, and the Constitution of India provides strong central government and weak states. Discuss. So these sort of questions, and you know the directive word is discuss. What is the meaning of discuss? See here, we need to understand that discuss itself says that it is most frequently used directive in any sort of a question where you find a discuss. It is expected of you that you need to go in depth about a particular topic. There is a statement, there is a argument, or there might be a hypothesis. So that is given in the question. You need to identify that argument or a hypothesis and make sure that you do a in-depth answer writing, not analysis, in-depth answer writing about that particular topic. Okay, so you take an argument, you try to do an in-depth answer writing using logical arguments. So what is most important in this sort of question? How do you address that? You make sure that you take up an argument, you do a in-depth answer writing, and with using logical arguments supported with sufficient evidences, because you cannot support an argument, otherwise it is going to be a very general argument. You have to support that with sufficient evidences. That means examples which are most relevant to that particular argument. So what is a discuss sort of a question? Means use it's a debate sort of a question. You take up a topic, you debate on that using logical arguments, and make sure that it is supported by sufficient argument. It is supported by sufficient examples or evidences, right? So it is like, for example, it is like a debate type of a question where you take up a issue, right? You take up that issue and you try to analyze that, or you provide an argument using your reasoning, and it is sufficiently backed up with evidences. So you should have a broader understanding about the topic, and it is expected that a broader coverage of the issue is expected of you. And what is expected, like you in the introduction, you talk about that topic, and after that you take up one by one features of the topic, maybe a characteristic features, maybe the rule, maybe the causes, maybe the consequences, their strengths, weaknesses, and you just write in your answers. But while writing those answers, by giving subheadings, you try to provide some sort of a logical argument, and that is supported with the sufficient proof or evidence, right? Okay, for example, what is the approach? You can introduce about the topic, like for example, what is the role of women in this freedom movement during the Gandhian era? In the introduction, you can talk about like some of the famous women freedom fighters at that point of time. That means you're creating a context. Or you can talk about the importance of women contribution at that point of time, right? Or maybe their contribution starting with the non-cooperation movement till the Quit India movement, or India like 1947 till independence, right? So that is how you can introduce your question or introduce your answer. Then you can progress into every aspect, because you're debating on a particular idea, core idea, and you're providing a logical argument with sufficient evidences. That means you are completely going in depth, right? So you can discuss about the positives and negatives, followed by its causes, consequences, and try to also provide solution or suggestions, example, but everything is confined with a sort of a logical argument. It is expected of you that you provide some sort of a rational thinking, make an provide your statement with some sort of evidence. Then this sort of discuss is going to be sufficiently addressed, right? Okay. So moving on to the next question. For example, you talk about the Constitution of India provides strong central government and weak states. So you're not supposed to criticize this. You only explain what is it trying to say. It is talking about the federal system of government, right? So then you go to the next part in the body part, right? What actually stipulates the distribution of power between center and the states. So center related powers, state related powers, and why the center is strong. This is how you have to move on with this sort of question, discuss. So hopefully you have understood what is the meaning of this discuss. You use debate with the logical arguments and supported with sufficient evidences. That is how you have to progress with this sort of questions, that is discuss. Moving on to the next one, critically discuss. In critically discuss, okay, in critically discuss again, discuss is what? Using a debate, or you have to do a in-depth answer writing using logical arguments as well as evidences. Here also you have to do the same thing. There is an option in discuss that positives or negatives can be written, but in critically discuss, always remember that you can write positives, but it is also supported with negatives or the drawbacks or critical analysis of, not critical analysis, or criticism of the statement or the hypothesis given, right? Using logic and sufficient proof. That is what critically discuss is all about. So critically means it is like both discuss plus evaluate, means you have to write positives and negatives. The focus is more on negatives, because here after writing negatives you may also try to provide a way forward, right? So it is broad based in nature. So it is in comparison to discuss, it is much more broad based, because here the analysis is much more deeper, right? And you have to present the positives along with the negative points, but here your own perspective, if you are able to present that, it is well appreciated. So in critically discuss sort of a question, it is expected that a student should provide his or her own perspective, and there is scope for you to like also express your like or dislike about a particular topic or a statement, and proving your dislike or a like with respect to with the support of sufficient evidences, right? Moving on. For example, we have two questions. Critically discuss the Gandhian view on non-violence. So how a conventional answer is written. If it is a discuss sort of a question, you definitely explain the Gandhian philosophy of non-violence, right? Ahimsa, Satyagraha, right? And it is concepts of Swaraj, all these concepts, it is a part of discuss. And when it comes to critically discuss, first you talk about all the positives of Gandhian non-violence. Then you progress with how it was not practical at that point of time, and what are all the drawbacks of Gandhian non-violence, and how, like for example, we had this extremist or like we have this revolutionary terrorists who did not actually believe in the concept of Gandhiji's non-violence, right? So his concept did not inspire others also, and it also had inherent drawbacks when you talk about a mass movement, right? So that is how you have to progress with critically discuss sort of questions. Same thing, critically discuss the prominent export items of Karnataka right? So you talk about like all the export items of Karnataka and related to which sectors. That is how one by one you are going to write. So then you talk about that this is what the export potential of Karnataka, but despite that we are lagging in the other aspects, like other topic, other components which we are not able to export. So our balance of trade is actually till 10, so imports are more. So that means you are trying to criticize this statement, given statement. That is how a discourse has to progress. Then you talk about if that is a problem, then what are the measures taken. So this is a critical discourse sort of question. Okay, hopefully you have understood this. If at all you don't understand, please repeat this video, replay this video. It is going to be useful to you much more, right? You'll be able to understand better. Okay, moving on. Next sort of a question is evaluate. The name itself says that here, yes, you have to examine a particular statement or an argument or a question, and after examining that, what is most important is that it comes to your agreement or disagreement. Means evaluate means what? To what extent you either agree or disagree with a particular statement or a thesis or hypothesis which is presented in the question. So in the question there is some statement is given. So either you agree or disagree, but while doing that, what sort of a logical arguments are you going to bring, and how it is supported with sufficient evidences. These are most important in evaluate type of questions. Means you either agree or disagree, but using logical arguments and the evidences, right? So in evaluate, that is the first point you need to remember. That is to what extent. Means while agreeing on a particular topic, a particular term, you go to a larger extent. You even go to an extent of criticizing the counter view also. That is your depth or your affinity towards proving that you believe in that argument, right? And after doing that, you should have to arrive at a particular verdict. So in evaluate, after evaluating, what is expected of you? That you have to give your verdict. So providing verdict or a conclusion is must and should in a evaluate sort of questions, that you arrive at a decision or conclusion based on overall observation or overall facts or overall logical arguments supported with the facts or the evidences. Based on that you arrive at an evidence, right? It can be either for or against the statement, doesn't matter. That shows that you are agreeing or disagreeing with a particular idea, but you have your sufficient understanding because you have evaluated as per your opinion and you have concluded with something by giving your own verdict. Okay, so here giving the verdict is important, but that verdict means that you have presented all the findings, all the reports based on the facts, based on the figures what I have presented. Hence this is what my verdict is, this is what I am arriving at. So to my conscience it is mostly true. That is what you say. So how much within a piece of research or true, how much of your statement or your finding is true, that is what the verdict you arrive at. Okay, so as per your agreement or the disagreement with the given argument, you provide the necessary evidences also, and final conclusion judgment is based on evidences, factors that justify your decisions, right? So your evidences and facts, whatever you presented and the argument you presented, that should justify your decision, and it is logical also because verdict is given based on the premises. This is what the premises are presented, and hence based on this I arrive at a particular conjunction, right? Okay, examples. Evaluate laws, rules, regulations or conscience as a source of ethical guidance. The meaning of this question is that we have conscience or conscience, right? The conscience is actually acting as a source of ethical guidance, right? There is conscience. What is conscience? Conscience is something which says like what is correct and what is incorrect or what is good or bad. That is there with every person, right? And with this sense of understanding like what is good, what is bad, what should be done, what should not be done, with this basic understanding, with this conscience, right, you do the work accordingly. And as the civilization proceeds, at that point of time, what the civilization collectively construed has to be like, this is very ethical and this is non-ethical, that is later on codified into laws, rules, regulations, or maybe some sort of a procedures, right? Okay, so the statement asks you, what are these laws, rules and regulations? They are nothing but, they were earlier part of time, it was the conscience, collective conscience of a masses or a society, which later on converted into laws, rules and regulations. Okay, and these, since they are based on ethical parameters, so therefore this conscience, from this conscience laws, rules and regulations are formed, right? And to what extent do you agree with this? You either say that yes, for anything to explain that something is good or bad, we need conscience, and this conscience is actually guiding you to be ethical. That has to be good or bad, ethical or non-ethical. So with this conscience, with this understanding of the self, understanding of right or wrong, you come up with codified morality, that is laws, rules and regulations. So one point of argument in evaluation is, in evaluate type of questions, you agree this statement and you provide all the necessary evidences, arguments in favor of it, and you conclude your answer by giving the verdict, yes, conscience is acting as a moral guidance, and based on this conscience only, it has actually come, it has become a laws, rules and regulations of a particular society. And we know that laws, rules, regulations is different from different countries based on their morality, their sense of conscience, right? On the contrary, we can say that always the conscience cannot be considered as a source of ethical guidance, because we can give examples of, there were practices in the past like sati pratha. Sati pratha was like, it was a collective conscience of the people and they considered it as to be rule, but it was inhuman. The same thing goes for corruption, and in other countries like, any person who's actually committing any mistake, they are hung to death or they stoned to death. So that is the contrary. That means you are not agreeing completely about this statement, and they evaluate, you present your views on the contrary to this statement, right? That is how you have to proceed with this sort of questions, that is evaluate, right? Same thing goes for again UPSC related question 2020. Microfinance is as an anti-poverty vaccine is aimed at asset creation and income security of the rural poor in India. Evaluate. Now the concept is, the role of microfinance means, obviously there are we have two issues. One is poverty and second is income insecurity. Okay, so how it can be cured? It can be cured by providing microfinance. And who is going to provide this microfinance? The self-help groups who are there in the rural areas. So the statement is like this. So then in that light, in that aspect, you have to evaluate whether the role of the self-help groups is able to achieve this objective. Twin objective means creating asset to the poor or providing income security to them. Would they be able to achieve that? The self-help group, you either agree or you disagree. To what extent you agree or disagree, present it in this sort of answers. Okay, hopefully you have understood this. Moving on to the next question, next directive, critically evaluate. So you know what is evaluate, that you have an argument, you have a statement, you either to what extent you agree or disagree, right? Critically evaluate is also like that, but here there is an option that you either agree or disagree. But here remember, the thumb rule in critically sort of a word is that you have to provide both agreement as well as disagreement, mostly confined towards disagreement, right? So that means it is again a sort of a evaluate sort of a question, but there the verdict is based on one-sided view or what you agree or disagree. Here it has to be a balance of both. It has to be based on a fair judgment, right? Positives as well as negatives. So you're doing a justice. Then you can provide your verdict based on that. But you have evaluated sufficiently as what are the pros, what are the cons, and based on this, I'm going to arrive at this conclusion. That is what therein critically evaluate. Okay, right? Here what happens? The students should be able to apply the sense of reasoning and justify with sufficient evidence to support or refute a statement. But make sure that support and refute a statement using sufficient arguments, right? After which you have to conclude, because conclusion is a must in the evaluation or critical evaluate type of questions, your verdict matters the most, right? So both sides of the debate has to be presented, right? And you must arrive at a position based on whatever the debate you have presented in the mains answer. In the answer, whatever the debate you have presented, based on that you have sufficient evidence, you have to arrive at a particular verdict, right? So on the evidences that guides you to arrive at a position, that's logical. Because you either have some understanding, you have presented both the positives and negatives by fair analysis and fair judgment, by doing a fair analysis of all those things, evaluating the both pros and cons, you can clearly arrive at a particular, you can take a particular stand, right? And that is justified in critically evaluate type of questions. Examples, we have this: critically evaluate the role of KMF in strengthening the rural economy in Karnataka. How to analyze this question? The statement, there is a statement. What does evaluate says? That you have to do, to what extent do you agree with this statement or you don't agree with. So yes, you can either agree that yes, KMF has actually strengthened the rural economy in Karnataka. This is my understanding, I do agree. So therefore I present sufficient arguments, and to support that I also provide with some sort of data facts also. That is one view. Otherwise I don't even accept it completely, right? So that is for evaluate. But in critically evaluate, you write both. You write yes, it has completely contributed towards the growth of rural economy because of A, B, C, D, E. Examples. Next you go with the other contrary. On the contrary, saying that KMF alone has not actually strengthened the rural economy because it is only confined to the dairy. Okay, so it is only confined to animal husbandry, but the rural economy is mostly agrarian based. So you bring in other sort of an argument where you tend to negate this statement, right? So you give sufficient argument. Now you have a fair analysis balance. You verdict. You give your verdict. That is critically evaluate. Okay, moving on to the next directive. Explain. The name, see, explain is a simple sort of a directive, and it has to like examine as to why, what, how, why something has happened, right? What is the meaning of something, or how this issue or this phenomena works. It is simple as that. So if it is like why, what, how sort of a question, it is nothing but you have to explain. So you have to explain what? Based on whatever the keyword or the core topic is given, you have to explain the simple meaning of it, right? So you have to write the meaning of it, or if any problem is given, talk about that problem. Ultimately, talk about in brief about that problem, and after which in the body try to write all the aspects related in that particular topic, as to find answer to why something is there. For example, why El Nino, or like explain the phenomena of El Nino, right? So you have to talk about all the aspects, all the reasons as to why this sort of a variation in the weather pattern is happening, right? You have to talk about all this. That is called as your simple explain, right? So it clearly give an account of how, why something happens, and after which you are expected to clarify with relevant facts and implication, because you have a point of argument. That point of argument is that you are trying to explain as to something is happening, right? And you are supporting that argument with relevant facts and data, right? Okay, so you next you need to explain or convince the reader by providing consistent context, or maybe you can also provide a context. Something has happened, you give a context, then you construct based on the facts, based on the concepts. But the key term here is that you should not you should not worry about the criticizing any topic. So do not worry about criticizing the topic, right? So no criticism is not expected. You are not supposed to criticize. You won't have to only talk about in detail about what the topic is all about, right? Its characteristic features, right? You talk about its causes, consequences, impact, but do not criticize. That criticism is not at all allowed in explain sort of questions, right? So therefore they are less exploratory. It's not like analyze, or it's not like examine sort of a question where you have to go much deeper and try to deconstruct the things. No, it's not less exploratory. It's direct, simple, only explain the terms, right? So only direct answer is expected, and simple analysis is more than sufficient, right? But you have to present it in a clear content. That's it. So give clear reason has to show that why something, as I said, talk about the why, how, what aspect of something is happening or something has happened, or maybe about a topic. You only have to explain it, only try to find answers as to this sort of questions like why, how, what, who. That's it. More than sufficient. So a simple format is introduction, body, conclusion is more than sufficient in explain sort of question. For example, explain the foreign policy of Aliya Ramaraya and write a brief note on its effects. Simple aspect about the foreign policy of the when we talk about Vijayanagara kingdom, right? So Vijayanagara kingdom's emperor Aliya Ramaraya, right? So you only have to explain this foreign policy. Do not criticize. What was the impact? We all know that what happened because of his intrusive foreign policy. It has led to the extinction or the downfall of Vijayanagara kingdom. We are not supposed to write that. Only explain the foreign policy, right? Or you can talk about, see, how the foundations of the modern world were laid by the American and the French Revolution. Only explain the foundations, right? How it was laid. Provide a context. Provide a sufficient provide sufficient arguments or the evidences showing us what laid the foundation for this revolution, causes, consequences, impact. Done. Okay, right? Moving on to the next question. Moving on to the next directives. So moving on to the next question directives. Okay. So examine and or review. So it is actually interchanged. The meaning of review and examine is mostly the same and almost the same. Therefore, we are actually integrated that in only one directive. So examine. The name itself says that you have to examine something. That means you have to do analysis. That is deeper analysis or in-depth analysis is done. But if we talk about examine, there are three sort of directives which are almost the same, but changes in terms of degree of the in-depth analysis. Like we have analysis, analyze, examine and comment. Comment is the least sort of a examine, that you try to deconstruct a particular topic. Then after which comes the examine, where you try to again do in-depth analysis, but it is much more greater than the comment but lesser than the analysis. So analysis requires overall holistic analysis, right? So examine means deeper investigation, or you have to do a probe into a particular topic or a given statement, right? And try to explain things in detail. So you have to make the reader to understand everything in detail. For that, a detailed analysis or a detailed investigation is important, right? So how your detailed investigation is done? You tend to take a topic and try to explore all the angles, and you write about all those angles. So all angles are related to a topic. Like for example, context is there, the causes, reasons, implications, role, way forward, everything has to be presented in an examine or a review type of a question, right? You are examining, like for example, a student in a lab try to examine probably a sample, like for example a frog. They are dissecting a frog, they try to examine. A deeper examining is done by analysis sort of question. Or like moderate, that is examine, right? Okay, so you evaluate the advantages and disadvantages or impacts of a topic. You are evaluating what are the advantages, what are the disadvantages, what are the pros, what are the cons, what are its heights, what are the merits, what are the demerits. Everything is examined of a particular topic or a statement, right? Then it is, while examining that, you present a view, right? Because based on your observation, I have observed this, and I have to present something because my observation has to be present in the answer. That is again certified with some sort of factual evidences. So your reasons as to why certain facts and issues identified are most important, provided with some evidences, and you also stressing on why a particular issue or a particular argument is most important, right? So here it is deeper than comment but lesser than analyze, as we have mentioned here. So analyze is more deeper deconstruction or a deeper investigation. Examine is moderate and comment is the least one, right? For example, so we have this sort of questions, both are given here. So we'll also finish off this critically examine. So critically examine, we all know what is meant by now. By now you must be knowing what is meant by critical word means you have to talk about, you have to do a in-depth analysis, you have to do an in-depth investigation, but providing both the pros and the cons. So in the pros, here it is optional. It can be positives or negatives, but here it is a must. Examine both the positives and the negative sides of an issue and come at a balanced conclusion. It may sound something similar to evaluate, but it is much more deeper than evaluate, right? So in critically examine, what happens? One has to write the positive interpretation first. So that is the rule you have to follow. First you write the positive interpretations, A, B, C, D, E, F. Then you talk about the followed by the drawbacks, right, or the negative aspects of a given topic. Then you arrive at a particular conclusion. You're not providing a verdict, but you're not saying because you have evaluated something, you're not providing the verdict, but you're trying to provide a balanced conclusion to close your answer, right? For example, examine the factors that led to India's industrial deceleration in the 1960s. So you're only examining in the sense you are doing a analysis, in-depth analysis, right? So all the factors that led to this one, you have to present that. Same thing, critically examine the aims and objectives of Shanghai Cooperation Organization. What importance does it hold for India? So when it comes to, see, the key term is Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Now the question is, critically examine what are the aims. So you are expected to write about the SEO in the introduction, talk about its aims, objectives, talk about how important SEO is for India. Then say you talk about the contrary, whether how much is it important for India or for the region or not. So if you agree on that certain aspect, present the agreeable part or the positive aspect. Then you talk about how it is not complete for India, because we have also have most importantly, we have seen the international relationship, the bilateral relationship works better than the group organization, and we also have other multilateral institutions or the organizations such as BRICS is there, right? We have this IPSA, we have BIMSTEC. Talk about those, right? Okay, and while concluding, you see that how SEO can fit into the India's Act East policy. Done. Moving on to the next directive, analyze. So analyze, as I said, it is deeper than examine. Means again you have to deconstruct, a deeper analysis or investigation is required, a thorough examination is required about every aspect. So as I said, it is like you are a medical student, you are trying to completely dissect a specimen given to you in the lab, and you keep the circulatory system separately, digestive system separately, neural system separately. You try to analyze each and every part in detail. So you take a part, you analyze it, then you move on. You analyze using a particular arguments, support with the evidence, then you move on to the second part. So but you don't leave any aspects of the particular topic, right? So thorough deconstruction of a particular topic is required, and it is broken down into parts. In examine, it may not be there, parts will not be there. You can holistically also examine, but it is part wise, basic fundamental parts are broken down about a topic, and it is every part is actually thoroughly analyzed. So okay, so critically examine, then you must critically examine each part. The question here, critical examine is thorough examination. It's like a fair judgment about like what are the goods, what are the bad of a particular part, right? Okay, so and try to establish how this each and every part is interconnected. So you examine each and every part, you analyze, do a deeper probe, then you try to link these parts, okay? And you're also using proper debates and evidences in support of your arguments, right? So it is also about how right or wrong a given statement is, right? So earlier either you accept or agree or disagree, but here you're verifying whether the given statement is to what extent is right or wrong. That depends on your analysis and your argument, how deep you want to do it, okay? So each part therefore is thoroughly understood and explained in depth, right? So it is like I already have mentioned that a medical student dissecting and analyzing a various organs of humans or a frog in a lab, introduction and conclusion are a must in examine and analyze sort of questions, and even on the comment also. You have to introduce, you have to conclude, right? There is no need for you to give a verdict. A balanced conclusion would be sufficient, okay? Example, analyze the distinguishing features of the notion of right to equality in the Constitution of USA and India. So the core term here is right to equality of India, and this is something which is taken from US only. So you have to compare the right to equality of India with the right to equality concept of USA. How do you do that? By presenting the constitutional terms which are there in India as to what are going to guarantee us with right to equality. For example, against untouchability, against for example, it is like a right to equality and right of representation. Okay, so these are Indian terms. Next is USA. How different is that? You're analyzing it, you're analyzing in deeper, right? Then you can also talk about its cons also, and you can present a balanced conclusion, right? So moving on to the next one. Green revolution was aimed to achieve self-reliance in food production. So the statement is given. Again, a deeper analysis is required. Whether it was able to achieve, we were able to achieve the self-reliance in food production to greater extent, yes, right? So you talk about all the pros of this statement. Then you can also present the cons, but most importantly, everything has to be supported with proper evidence, and you don't take a decision, you talk about a fair conclusion. That is your critically, that is your analyze, done. So critically analyze, again, critical analysis means what? A fair judgment is required. Here you have to analyze things, right? You can present both the negative as well as the positive terms, right? In the positives you can write all in favor of a particular statement, and in negatives you tend to criticize more, you trying to find faults, and you tend to provide your opinion, because see what happens in critical analysis, your analysis, your opinion matters most, because you are observing it as per your point of view, and that has been supported with some circumstantial evidences, right? So a deeper analysis or the dissection is required, right? You present the causes of a phenomena, right? First you present all the causes, it's like brainstorming, and after that you try to, and apart from the causes, try to find all the other dimensions, and then you, of all the dimensions or the causes, you tend to find the both positives and negatives, try to criticize that particular premise. Examples: critically analyze the concept of dedication and objectivity in public administration, right? Pardon the spelling mistake, dedication and objectivity in the public administration. So critical analysis means you talk about how much in the public administration or in bureaucracy the dedication and objectivity is there. You either agree or you disagree, right? But it is critical analysis means you have to present both sides of the views. You should also present, you cannot directly go with the statement and keep on criticizing the statement. You cannot do that. You also have to talk about the pros. Then you can talk about the cons. The same thing goes for the other question, that is analyze the ethical issues in the international relations. Ethical means, see in IR what happens, nothing like, we don't have a permanent friends and permanent enemies also. We are all situational partners. So that thing you have to present, and sometimes it is necessary for you to not even take a stand when the world is taking a particular stand when it comes to, for example, Ukraine-Russia crisis or Israel-Hamas crisis. You are partners with Israel and Russia. So in that, you can't be completely ethical, right? At the same time, there are certain ethical issues which are coming in conflict with the particular foreign policy of a nation and to ours. So we don't tend to align with them. So you have to talk about both the aspects, right? So that is your critically analyze, right? And if you talk about one question, right? Critically analyze the problem of black money in India. Black money, parallel economy. So simple question, what is the problem of black money in India, right? How do you address this question? You talk about parallel economy, that means you explain about the black money or the parallel economy. Basic definition is required. Then you go much deeper, saying first of all, what is black money, right? What are all the sources of black money? What are all the impact of what are the causes of black money or the parallel economy, right? And what is the impact of such an economy to the such a black money or parallel economy on the mainstream economy of India, and how it is going to affect us economically, right? Then difficult, also try to say how it is difficult for us to identify black money in India as well as other countries, especially in the tax havens like Switzerland or other European countries. What is the operational difficulties, what needs to be done, right? A way forward is also can be written in this question, but since it is a critically analyzed, you have to address the central theme of the question, that is problem of black money. So something like a solution you have to provide in critically analyze. After having analyzed all the aspects of black money problem, you have to provide something as a solution type. This is how you have to address the questions related to critically analyze, right? Next, so these are all simple, describe, give an account of, have the same connotation, same meaning. As I said, like discuss, it is the simplest directive. You have to explain as to what something is, right? So simple directive based on conceptual and theoretical knowledge means you have a particular topic, you have a particular phenomena. About that, how much you know, explain. For example, if you talk about describe the layers of earth, you have to deconstruct, right? You have to talk about each and every layer of the earth, and you talk about everything. Like for example, what is its length, what is its depth, and what is the mineral composition, right? And you talk about what are the other characteristics, what are the other layers, and what layers separates layer discontinuities also. That is something which you describe in a particular phenomena, right? Or a simple statement of a facts. You only have to present. For example, if you talk about describe, how can I say, like, describe Rowlatt Act or describe the Quit India movement. Only have to describe that. You only present all the facts and figures, right? So there is no criticism is required. Why? Because you only have to describe. Okay, you don't criticize or analyze a topic. You don't analyze the topic because when you're analyzing, you're trying to give your own opinion. You're examining things in a deeper way. Here there is no examination. Only you have a particular static subject. You only have to describe its characteristic features. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less. Okay. Example: describe the code of conduct and quality of service delivery as most important at present scenario in governance. So only focus on code of conduct, right? And quality of service delivery. How is it important for governance? You only describe it. You don't have to criticize or analyze, nothing. Okay. So again, describes various causes and the effects of landslides. Simple. You define what is a landslide, what are the causes of landslide, and what is the effect of landslide. Next, mention the important components of the landslide, national landslide risk management strategy. You only have to describe the strategy or its aims, objectives, or the goals of this national landslide risk management strategy. That's it. This is most simplest form of a question, right? Moving on to the next directive. Comment, justify, view, substantiate. You might come across questions like as per your, according to your view, or justify. Comment. Usually comment sort of a questions means a statement is given and it is used as a suffix. Means after the statement, the comment sort of questions will be ending with the particular statement. The same thing happens with justify also. So all those four means the same: comment, substantiate, justify, view. So it will be easy for you to understand what happens. As we have discussed, like examine and analyze, this is the least form of in-depth or analysis. So analysis is required, or examination, a probe is required. You have to look into a particular topic, right? Try to look into all aspects, and after that you have to present your observation. So pick up the main theme. You have a theme of a particular question or a statement, and or a point of a topic, and express your opinion. That is why as per your view. Or substantiate means a statement is given, you have to substantiate more on that. You have to look deeper into it, right? And justify also, because a statement is given, you have to give your verdict or a conclusion based on whatever the statement is given. You need to justify the statement which is given in the question, but providing with a deeper analysis, right? So you have to express your point of view, but that is based on what? As we have discussed earlier, it is based on logical arguments and evidences or references which are used, must be used as a relevant evidences. Okay. So here the whole problem or issue is presented, and different aspect views are presented related to the issue or the problem. Simple as that, right? So you only have to examine and try to provide your point of view based on that, right? So arguments will be sufficient. Facts, example, or should be provided in favor of your opinion or view. You only present arguments, right? You agree with the statement and you have to justify. Don't write contrary to the statement. A statement or topic is there. Do not write contrary to that. You provide argument statements with some evidences. That would be more than sufficient. So usually it is used as what? Suffix. As I said, there are questions like this. For example, the part played by the Karnataka in the Quit India movement was unique. Comment. It is used as a suffix, right? So answer approach means what? Present different views related to issue or a problem in an analytical manner. Criticism is not required, right? So criticism is a view of a scholar, but whereas a comment is your own view. You're not criticizing. It is only based on your viewpoint. Okay. So this does not require that deeper analysis. So therefore, this whatever the thing is presented here, present different views, analyze different views, and related to a particular issue or problem in an analytical manner with evidences that will be more than sufficient to justify your answer. So this type of questions are unique. Why? Because you have the liberty of writing answers as per your own opinion. Especially this sort of questions can be asked in paper 4, your GS, that is ethics, integrity and aptitude, because mostly your opinion based questions will be asked in ethics, right? So you can apply this sort of questions will be more, and you can have the liberty of expressing your views but based on concrete arguments, logical arguments supported with evidences. It can be from any source. Evidence is most important, right? Next, comment on the sources, resource potential of the long coastline of India. Simple as that. What is the potential of Indian coastline, and highlight the status of natural hazard preparedness in this series. So comment, you have understood. You have to talk about each and every part, try to analyze that and present your views along with the supportive arguments and evidences. Moving on to the next directives, critically comment. So comment, we know we have to examine something, we have to examine every part and try to present it in front of the reader. Critically comment, same thing, but it is a much more detailed than the comment. Systematic evaluation using fair judgment of a particular topic is required based on concrete ground or evidences, right? Again, double evaluation means one's view but a more analytical view and using a fair judgment opinion, right? So view for or against a particular topic, you have to write all merits, and you have to, it is followed by demerits. So merits should be written first while analyzing or commenting or examining a particular thing. You have to write the merits and followed by demerits, and then meticulously see all the issues one by one, right? So there are merits, ABCD points, you observe each and every points and you try to analyze each and every points. Go for the demerits, do the same thing for the demerits also. So comment is one's view, whereas critical comments means what? You are expressing your view, but after a scientific and the systematic analysis or evaluation of a particular topic and all its branches or all its wings, right? Example, critically comment on the nationalism. Okay, if this is a question, let us consider that if this is a question that you have to critically comment on a nationalism. So nationalism, how can one write if it is a comment sort of a question? In comment sort of a question, you simply say what is nationalism. Nationalism is very much important, it is sacrosanct, and one cannot allowed to say contrary to it, right? Because you only talk in favor of it. You don't have to present any contradictory views. But here in the critical comment, you have to again criticize or examine the basic principle of nationalism, right? So maybe the the negative aspect of nationalism, we have seen that overt nationalism, for example, we can give the Second World War Nazis, over nationalism, that can also lead to some sort of a drawbacks or wars or some uneven consequences. So you have to focus on that aspect also. So both the positives and the negative consequences of effective nationalism had to be written. That comes in critically comment. Okay, next, moving on to the next question or question directives, that is elucidate. See, elucidate is simple expansion. Elucidate means what? You are trying to expand a given statement or a question, right? So if it is a 10-marker question, how much you can expand? A statement is given, you have to only expand. Like it is somewhat like describe, but you are trying to expand it in different dimensions also, right? So that is based on whatever the question is, 10 marker, 50 marker, you expand the given statement with some necessary supportive arguments, right? So it is supported with situational or appropriate examples. Examples matters the most. It is again, it can be this sort of elucidate is also used in your paper 2 and your paper in paper 1 in Indian society, and in paper 4 also it is used, right? So you only have to make something clear. So something is presented to you that is in a crude format, you have to elaborate that, you have to elucidate that and make it clear to the reader, right? So throw light upon to something or make something lucid. So that means again follow this rule, cannot go against a given statement. In elucidate, you cannot write something contrary to it. like comment, you have to go with the statement, but try to make it much more clear. A statement is given, make it clear to the reader by circumstantial evidences, right? Or some very acceptable proofs. Example, elucidate the factors influencing the distribution of population. Simple. What are the factors, affecting the distribution of population? Write all those factors. You only have to elaborate that. You only have to expand it, right? So next, elucidate the human values and their types with special references to Patanjali's classification of virtues. You should have clear understanding about what are the Patanjali's view on virtues, what are those virtues. Then you talk about what are the human values which can be a part of this Patanjali's, which is taken from the Patanjali's classification of virtues, and you just have to elucidate them, just have to expand them, right? So even though elucidate, elaborate, expand, exemplify appears to be same, minor differences are there. They are nothing but they are objectives to make sure that it has to be expanded. The given statement has to be expanded. Thumb rule is that you cannot go against the given statement. You only have to fill in the blanks. You only have to fill in additional information. That is the only difference between elaborate, expand, elucidate and exemplify, right? More or less similar words, right? But different slightly. Elucidate means what? Make something clear with examples. We already discussed, right? Expand it with examples. Elaborate and expand again means detailed explanation. So it is much more than the elucidate. Detailed explanation is there, and the more focus is on the central theme of the question. A theme is there, you keep on describing or elaborating that with detailed argument and detailed examination, right? Okay, next, exemplify. Exemplify means what? Giving a typical example of the particular category. Means you have to again take up the argument, you try to provide sufficient documentary evidence or examples to support that argument, and you keep on elaborating that. So must also correlate or link to the topic with the contemporary and the current affairs. This is most important. Exemplify means what? You are applying your contemporary or the current related knowledge or examples in those statements, right? Moving on to the next directives. How far, to what extent? Opinion based, clearly opinion based. Like, you have to make sure that you have a particular this sort of questions, make a thorough assessment of evidence. So there is a statement is given, and you know that there are certain arguments in favor of that or maybe against that, but whatever the evidence you present, you have to be completely confident, you have to be completely convincing the reader, and you have to say that to what extent, how far you either agree with that or you disagree with that, but that is based on the weightage of content or the examples you are going to present in favor of your argument. So you should be fully confident, right, as to verify that whether the evidence what you have presented as a proof is going to be accepted or not, in favor of the argument or against the argument. But you should be completely confident, and you have to be imposing your understanding or imposing your viewpoint on the reader. That means you have to completely convincingly present your answers in a convincing manner. Okay, you can also provide alternate explanations, but justification should be done. What justification? That yes, I agree on this, I am providing the most authentic examples and arguments, and I justify based a given statement is made with the help of your authentic arguments, examples. Most importantly, contemporary based examples are going to be much more acceptable. So if a question is related to how far or to what extent, try to provide the most recent or the contemporary examples, right? Example, for example, how and to what extent would micro irrigation help in solving India's water crisis? The issue is Indian water crisis, and the question is about how far do you think that the micro irrigation is going to help you in solving the water crisis? You either agree yes, or you say no, it's not going to completely solve the Indian water crisis, and a micro irrigation alone is not, because micro irrigation, we know that depletion of groundwater sources. You can also provide alternatives, for example, like inter-river linkages also, and we can talk about construction of barrages, and we can also talk about probably like other sort of hydroponics. So different methods are also there, but you take a stand and you completely convincingly provide those arguments either in favor or against it, right? So to what extent in your view that the parliament is able to ensure accountability of the executive in the India? Right? There are so many arguments and there are so many constitutional provisions where it is clearly stated that executive is answerable to the parliament. Right? So you can present that argument by saying the constitutional provisions. At the same time, on the contrary, you can also say that though it is there, right, but many instances, that is, you are providing examples, contemporary examples, where you clearly shown that where the parliamentary has been, the executive has overridden the parliamentary power, right? 1975 national emergency. So therefore, you have to be very much clear about which stand you are going to take, and support it with sufficient examples and arguments, and make your argument and completely make it clear to the reader that this is your viewpoint, okay, and this is what you agree or disagree with. Done. Next, enumerate, list out. Simple. So the name itself says enumerate and list out. In these sort of a directive questions, you don't have, it's not necessary for you to write the introduction or conclusion. You can, if it is a 10 marker, you can directly go and list out what has been asked in a particular question. For example, if anything is there, list out, enumerate Nolan committees observation or ethical, Nolan committees reports, you have to list out on all the virtues or ethical values. You just please list out, that's it. Or you can talk about enumerate which are the critically endangered species as per the schedule 1. You can only list out those, that's it. So in simple terms, you need to just list down the things. Maybe while listing down, you can talk about, elaborate about more about the topic, write the characteristic features, right, advantages, disadvantages of a particular list, maybe a list of measures, everything, or at least address the demand of the question. You only have to make a list of all those things, or make a list of all the policies of a particular ruler. That's it, more than sufficient. Okay, so context, introduction and conclusion here is optional. You can either provide, or you can also take a liberty of even not providing. If your time is not there, you only list them. That would be more than sufficient. There is no rule as to that introduction, conclusion is necessary. So for example, ILO is promoting labor welfare in Asiatic countries during the last 20 years, right? Okay, so enumerate the achievements, enumerate the achievements of ILO, International Labour Organization, in promoting labor welfare in Asiatic countries. Only make a list of all the initiatives of the International Labour Organization in promoting the labor welfare in Asia. Only listing them, more than sufficient. Again, enumerate the effects of depreciation of rupee on India's balance of payments. All the effects of depreciation, only making a list of that. That's it. Or maybe list and explain the different types of tides and theories of origin. Simple as that. Types of tides, means of origin. Done. Simple as that. No in-depth analysis is required, right? And other sort of directives is simple directives. The name itself says that distinguish or difference between. So I don't think that you will be confused with this sort of questions. It clearly says that there is one topic, and there are two ideas, two key terms are there. You have to distinguish between those two key terms. For example, distinguish what is the difference between Indus Valley civilization and the Vedic civilization. What is the difference between a CFL and a LED? What is the difference between, like for example, maybe talk about Madhav Gadil committee report or a Kasturirangan committee report. So it's all about, like, maybe what is the distinguish between Nilgiri, Thar and Nilgai. So it's completely like that. Okay, so you can only compare the topic, compare the characteristic feature. You have particular characteristic features, right? For example, if a topic is all about ungulates means they are the bovines, right? So you only have to differentiate between those two. So you take up the characteristics, for example, size, appearance, color, and the food habit, everything like that. So you only distinguish about the topics in a question, and only introduction is must, and conclusion is optional. Conclusion you can write, or it is left to you, because you can present your answer using two tables, or you can present your answer by saying you take like so many characteristic features, and in that characteristic features you can differentiate or distinguish between the two, that characteristic between the two key terms, one after the other. So you have given one statement, for example, A has this whereas B has this. That means in the same statement you are trying to find out the difference or the distinguish. For example, difference between Mahatma Gandhiji and Rabindranath Tagore in their approach towards education and nationalism. The approach, so education and nationalism is the core objective, or this is the focal area. So what is Mahatma Gandhiji's belief, what is his belief system, and what is Tagore's belief system, right? What are their thinking about that, right? Next, distinguish between the capital budget and the revenue budgets clearly. So you can clearly distinguish between capital budget and revenue budget. That's more than sufficient. Moving on to the next directive, compare and contrast. See, what is the difference between distinguish and difference and compare and contrast? Means distinguish and difference is completely that you have to provide the alter ego. That means what is something, what is other thing. It's like completely the distinguishing factors. Whereas in compare, you try to always try to come up with the similarities. So what is similar between two things, right? So compare and contrast. So you have to present all the similar ideas and all the different ideas also, or all the favorable or all the compatible ideas together and all the uncompatible ideas in the other column or other table also. That is compare and contrast. Means you identify the similarities and dissimilarities and present them one after the other. So you present the similarities first, then you go and present the dissimilarities next to that, right? So obviously we have two key terms. You only have to identify the similarities and dissimilarities. As I said, it can be presented in table format, two table format, or it can be presented first you talk about the similarities sentence wise, then you go with the differences, or point by point presentation. This is similar, this is dissimilar, this is similar, this is dissimilar. This is how you have to progress with this sort of directive questions, right? So, but comparison of the similarities and the differences are the requirement. You have to compare always these are the similarities, these are the dissimilarities, more than sufficient. For example, compare and contrast between the national parks and wildlife sanctuaries. So, national parks, wildlife sanctuaries. Similarities, similarities, dissimilarities, dissimilarities, done, more than sufficient, okay? And there is no necessity that you have to present the conclusion. If you provide the conclusion also, it is more than it will be an additional thing, otherwise this would be sufficient, okay? So hopefully this episode or this edition of directives, which is aimed at helping the students, mains taking students, your prelims is over and you must be preparing for your mains. So that is why we have targeted you people, try to help you with these sort of directives and try to specifically explain to you as to what is the actual meaning of these directive words and how you need to approach a particular question. If you have this clarity, I think your answer writing is going to be much more refined and it is going to be addressing the actual demand of the question. So the probability of you scoring more marks is more. Thank you so much. Please subscribe to our channel, and for more course details, because we are in Gnana Gangotri, we have launched one Astra 101, which is a mains dedicated mains test series for KAS aspirant, right? So you can visit our website, visit us on Telegram, whatever the link given below, and try to inquire about the courses. We are aimed at helping the students to realize your goals, and we have devised this test series in such a technical way that we are going to observe, like in the last videos also we have given some tips about how to write a mains answer, what are the parameters you need to follow, and we have a clear understanding as to how the mains questions are going to be framed, what a student needs to be done. So please enroll yourself to the mains test series, and for all other sort of information or details, please keep watching our videos at Gnana Gangotri in YouTube. Thank you so much.